Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project. Copyrighted edition for our video channel. And the producer Huck is in the room. She's in the building. She's demanding, barking orders. And she's been kind of pushy lately. But we love her. And you find out with the Pyrenees that if you don't really push them too hard, they mind pretty well. But if you try to push them, or you try to demand something, they're obstinate sometimes. But we're really lucky because Huck's a good dog, and she loves us a lot. You're a good puppy. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're a good girl. Oh, thank you. You're a good girl. Okay, so we're going to get on with the show here. Huck's done her introductions. Yep, there she goes, barking away. So, this is a missing person segment. And a pretty unusual one to beat that. Got two stories. And before I get into those, got some pretty nasty comments from some people saying, hey, you know what, these historical stories are worthless, we're not interested, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, I noticed that when I put up a story that's recent, like within the last year, viewership goes up maybe 50%. And I'm really disappointed that some people don't see the value in the historic pieces. Because I can tell you that I've learned, teams learned a ton from doing the historical side of missing people. As an example, let's just say a normal serial killer is active between the ages of, say, 20 to 50. Well, if you have disappearances that go on that are 100, 200 years old, you know it's not a serial killer. At least not in the conventional sense. So that sort of eliminates that. But if you also think about the way the world's changed, our ability to move around the world in the last 50 years fast, compared to the early 1900s, it really puts a new spin on things. Now, this first case I'm going to talk to you about, recent one, we've never talked about it before. I've never heard of it talked about anywhere before. As is 90% of our cases, we do our own research and other people just mooch off us. And this will be a story, I guarantee, that'll be mooched. It involves a woman, a very interesting lady named Sarah Reiser. 7 years old. She went missing April 5th, 1964. And she was a retired secretary that was employed in San Francisco and lived in a city called Fairfax. She had a brother who was a dentist in Los Angeles. And Sarah was somebody that was single, worked very hard, saved her money, and always wanted to take a big trip. But she did a lot of things in her years that didn't cost a lot of money. She loved to hike. She loved the outdoors. She was a member of the Bay Area Sierra Club. She was healthy, and she was active. Well, her brother stated that, again, Sarah saved a lot of her money. And she wanted to take a cruise, but not a conventional cruise on a big ship. She found an opportunity to get on a 98-foot 19th century brigantine that was a cruise for a year that left from Miami and then went through the Panama Canal. The ship's name was the Yankee, and it was built in 1915. And it was taken over by the Germans during the war as a North American pilot boat. It was later captured by the British during World War II, and now, at the time of this cruise, it was owned by Windjammer Cruises. Windjammer's still alive. Well, Sarah saw that this was a trip of a lifetime. It was something that she always wanted to do. It cost her $4,700 back in 1964, which was a lot of money. It's enough to buy a house back then. But she was single and she wanted to do it. It would stop at a lot of smaller islands. It wasn't going to the biggest tourist spots in the world. It was a smaller ship. And she thought this was great. She ran it by her brother, the dentist in LA. He thought it was a great thing. He couldn't go, though. Now, the ship itself sailed from Panama into the Galapagos Islands. The ship had 7 crew members and carried 15 passengers. This is the best picture I could come up with on Sarah. Again, for being 70 years old, super active, in 1964, this was really an admirable person. She was described as smart, adventuresome, and knowledgeable. So when I was doing this story, I just liked her. The way she was described as adventuresome at 70 years old in 1964, when a lot of older people were kind of put in a box and, hey, you're over 60, it's time for you to retire and stay home. Not her. Well, the ship sailed into the Galapagos and disembarked on what was called Florianana Island. It's one of the southernmost islands in the Galapagos chain. It's about 67 square miles in size, and the high point is about 2,100 feet. Population at the time was 50. It was a volcanic island, and it was 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador. Now, the Ecuadorians claim the Galapagos Islands as theirs. I got to tell you, Galapagos Islands is one of those places that was on my bucket list. I've always wanted to go because I remember Darwin always thought that most of the animals on that were something out of history. Well, the island was previously called Santa Maria Island and Mercedes Island. And when they arrived, Sarah and the passengers disembarked and met a good many of the 50 people who lived on the island. Well, Sarah and another friend of hers that she met on the ship wanted to hike the island. And they were told where the path was, which way to go, how long it would take. It wasn't a strenuous hike. There wasn't a lot of uphill. It was kind of near the coast, had beautiful views. If you look up the island on Google, it'll take your breath away. The water is just crystal clear. Beautiful. And the island was known at that time to have giant turtles and big iguanas. Let me tell you something about iguanas. So iguanas, we're talking about big ones like this. Probably 25 years ago, I went with a group of policemen to San Juan in the Virgin Islands. And we were staying at this place. It wasn't expensive. Policemen can't afford much. But when we stayed at this hotel, it's kind of all the rooms surrounded this pool, and they had iguanas there all the time. And one of the housekeepers, she was really nice to us, and she said, hey guys, come here. And she took us over to this bush. I don't even know what kind of bush it was, but it had these big red flowers. And she goes, do you like animals? And we all said, yeah. So she goes, here, take one of these big flowers off the bush and go over to that iguana right there, and it will come over and slowly take that from you. I said, I'll do that. So we go over there, and this iguana struts over to me quickly. Tongue goes out about that far, grabs it, pulls it back. I thought, that is cool. We must have done that 20 times while we were there for 5 days, but iguanas are really neat. nothing to hurt you. So Sarah and her friend take off on this path. Nothing on the island deadly. Weather was good. And her friend walked about a mile, and her friend said that she had some pebbles in her shoes. And Sarah says, okay, I'm just going to keep walking just a little bit. I'm not going to go far, and I'll wait for you. So Sarah gets out of view. Her friend takes the pebbles out. What do you call that? Right there, what I just explained. Point of separation. Her friend gets the pebbles out of her shoes, starts walking down the path. Gets into some areas that have, you can see down the trail a long ways, doesn't see Sarah. So, takes the path all the way around, heads back to the ship, still hasn't seen Sarah, and thought, well, maybe she just strutted her way around fast and is already on the ship. Well, she gets to the ship and she starts to board. She says, where's Sarah at? And the captain says, Sarah didn't come back. Passenger said, what do you mean? No, Sarah never came back. She left with you. This other woman explained what happened, and the captain got 4 of the crew, and he said, take me back to the point where you last saw Sarah. So they all went out, searched through the night, nothing. The captain made a request for the Ecuadorian Navy, which had 1 ship on those islands, to start responding. And he told the locals that they needed help, and if one of them could go to the other islands and rally some assistance because they had a missing passenger. And they did. So the next morning, the captain was blown away. 40 German Ecuadorians from other islands had arrived. And the Ecuadorian Navy was en route and was going to be there within hours. So the captain took everybody back to the area where they saw that Sarah disappeared, broke them up into groups, and gave them quadrants to search. Well, this went on for a day. The next day, the Ecuadorian Navy arrives, and they start helping with the search. Well, when the Ecuadorian Navy was requested for a missing U.S. citizen, it was the protocol that the Navy contact the U.S. Embassy in Quito and tell them what had happened. The ambassador in Quito contacted the U.S. Air Force and immediately asked if an Air Force rescue team could start responding. This is amazing. 1964. This ambassador was on top of it. So the closest Air Force rescue team was in Panama, a place that the ship had been days earlier. And the Air Force on April 16th sent a Global Star airplane, which is big. It left Panama with 50 Marines and 50 Army soldiers and a helicopter. Yeah, big. It takes off and it gets into the Galapagos, and they already planned where they would have to land. And there was an old abandoned World War II airfield on Seymour Island. Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew if it was good. Nobody knew if they could land. They made a couple passes on it. The captain said, I think we can land there. And they did. After the landing, they took the helicopter out, took fuel out, they took the soldiers off. Everything had to be self-sustaining because there was nothing on these islands to help the soldiers, the Air Force, nothing. So they get everybody off, they feed everybody, and then they start ferrying the soldiers and the Marines and the Army back and forth between there and the rescue location. Now, the Ecuadorian Navy just had 1 small boat for the whole islands and was already on scene. They were organizing things. The next day, soldiers arrived after being ferried from their aircraft, and they get broken up into grids. And they're starting to search areas that hadn't been searched by the other people that were there from Ecuador. They'd already been on it for several days. They hadn't found anything. It was really confusing. And when you read the articles, you find that everyone knew why they were there, but they couldn't figure out where she could go. So, Air Force, the Global Star left Panama on the 16th. They get there, they start working on the 18th, 19th, 20th. And they're not finding anything. Well, the ship that Sarah came in on, the Yankee, had departed. And they actually took all of her things off the ship and put it with the military. Now, what's interesting about that? This was in '64. Just recently, there were some passengers on a ship that were left behind who were on a day trip, and they didn't make it back to their ship. And this was in Africa. And this was on like a 21-day cruise. Well, they didn't make it back to their ship. The ship took off. Now it's the job of the passenger to meet up with the ship at their next port. A huge pain in the butt. So the ship takes off. Sarah's not found. And on April 20th, the major in charge of the Air Force team, Major Frederick Brent of the 17th Air Force Rescue, told the press, "We didn't find one sign of that woman." On April 21st, after searching that day, they completed it, and they said, "We can't find her. We're going to terminate the search effort." They loaded up their plane, put the helicopter back in it, and away they flew to Panama. Now, all this time, Sarah had a sister that had been communicating with the embassy. And communications between the islands and the coast were horrible back then. And they were infrequent. And her brother, the dentist in LA, got involved. And he even said that the communication was horrid and irregular. But finally, they got a notice that she hadn't been found, and they gave up. Well, the Yankee continued on its cruise. The sister and the brother went to San Francisco and on to Fairfax to try to take care of Sarah's property. December 7th, the same year, '64, there was a public notice in the paper in Marin County where Sarah lived that there was an appointment of a trustee to Sarah's affairs, meaning she wasn't found. A year later, December 13th, '65, there was a public notice of the sale of Sarah's property, indicating she was never found. Now, after the Yankee left the Galapagos Islands, now they left there in late April of '64. In July 29th of the same year, bad luck plagued that ship again. It ran aground on the Rarotonga Island in the South Seas. Nobody was injured, ship was damaged, and everyone had to be evacuated. Sounds like an unlucky cruise. Now, I dug deep on this issue with Sarah, and I found something pretty peculiar. And I call it the German trifecta. Sarah was German. The ship she was sailing on was operated by the German Navy. And the first group to search for her were a group of Germans from Ecuador. Trifecta. Coincidence? Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's nothing to see here. Just move on. Yeah, right. I don't know what happened to Sarah. The rumors were, at the end, people said, well, she must have fallen into the ocean and been swept away. A couple of the articles said that her and her friend were on the beach when Sarah walked away. Other articles, the majority said they were on a trail off the beach when she walked away. She was in good health. If she would have had a medical emergency on the island, they would have found her. There's no doubt in my mind. Aren't a lot of places to go. I'll leave it at that. The next case. I don't have a map for you because I couldn't figure this one out. But I'll tell you the story. October 30th, 1901. Boston area. A boy named Rozante Pitt, 3 years old, went missing from his home, and that was at 24 Bodine Street in West Cambridge, Massachusetts. It was amazing because he disappeared very quickly. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. He was gone. Family searched, got neighbors to search. They searched all the way through the night. Well, unbeknownst to them, at 5 p.m. that night, about 7 hours after he disappeared, Rozante is found by a police officer roaming, the article said, the wilds of Brookline. Rozante was French-Canadian. He was 3 years old, so he didn't speak much anyhow. But what he did speak, the policeman didn't understand. So you could tell that Rozante had been on the road. He was dirty, filthy. He'd been gone for about 7 hours. Now, October 31st, local papers publicized the fact that this little boy was found, and he was being kept at a sort of a hospital thing for kids because he couldn't figure out who his parents were. Well, Mr. Pitt read the paper that day and saw the story and picked up and went there to pick up his son. Now here's the part that's weird. The region around this didn't have bridges like it has today. And simultaneously, as Rozante is disappearing from West Cambridge, another boy in Brookline named Charlie Cronin, also 3 years old, disappears from Brookline at about the same time. Now, I got to say, friends, I've been doing this for a long time. This is the most coincidental exchange of children I've ever seen. So you got Rozante, little boy, missing from Cambridge and found in Brookline. At about the same time, you have a little boy named Charlie Cronin who disappears from Brookline and is found later that day in West Cambridge. Yeah, you heard that right. Both parents eventually got their kids within a day and a half. Parents didn't know each other. The kids didn't know each other. The question was, did the kids ever cross paths? But the bigger question to me is, there's so many rivers, creeks in these areas, I didn't understand the path they took. But one of the headlines in the articles about this said that the boys traveled 10 miles. 3 years old, 10 miles. In an urban setting, which you got to think this was even for 1901, urban setting, a 3-year-old boy should be found 95% of the time in 0.7 miles, 0.7 of a mile or less. Yeah, you heard that right. But they're saying these kids traveled 10 miles. That's 10 miles in about 7 to 8 hours. That's more than 1 mile per hour. Non-stop, no food, no water. But the better question to me is, in all of those miles, there wasn't an adult that saw these boys walking down the street alone and didn't think that was odd and go out and bring him to safety? Just saying, folks. Now, there's been a lot of times in my research where little boys are found by others in the middle of nowhere, and those people do jack squat. Best example, Jared Atadero, about 3 miles down a dirt trail in the middle of nowhere, walks up to 2 fishermen and asks the fishermen who are fishing in the river, "There bears around here?" And he has a stick and he's kind of hitting the water with the stick. And the fishermen told the police later, "No, there's no bear around here. Stop hitting the water with our stick." And both of them walked away from Jared and didn't do anything. Jared was never seen alive again. I've been to that area. I actually interviewed one of those men. And knowing the consequences of Jared, it hurt bad. Now, I told this story before, but I'll tell it again. About 4 or 5 air miles from that exact spot where those fishermen saw Jared, Angie and I were in Rocky Mountain National Park researching another missing person case. And we're in a very remote area walking around a lake. Had to walk in like 3 or 4 miles. And around this lake it was muddy and you could see elk tracks, moose tracks, everything. It was wild. It's in a national park, so there's no hunting. And I'm in front, Angie's behind me, and Angie taps me and says, "Hey Dave, stop. Look behind you." Turn around, look behind me. There's a little boy, like 4 or 5 years old. Jared's age. I said, "Hi." He goes, "Hi." He's not with anybody. There's nobody around. And I thought, oh my gosh. In my mind, I'm thinking, is this a life test? Because I know what those fishermen did to Jared. There's no way in hell I'm walking away from this boy. And I talked to him, and Angie talked to him, and I said, "Who are you here with?" "Oh, my family." "Well, where are they?" "Oh, they're at the campsite." So we are no more than 6 feet from the lake. No more than 6 feet. The trail walks right next to the lake. So this little boy takes us back to the camp. And here's his dad laying in a tent, reading a book. And mom is sitting in a chair with a little baby. Part of me wants to scream at these idiots. The other part of me knows that if I do that, they're not going to really get it and they aren't going to listen. So I calmly walked up with this little boy. He was the nicest little boy you'd want. I said, "Hi there. We just found your boy over by the lake." "Oh, yeah. And I said, "So do you know that other children have disappeared from this area?" "Oh, no." I said, "So in the area we're in right now, there's mountain lion, there's moose, there's elk, there's bobcats, and there's bear." "Oh, yeah?" And any one of those could attack and kill your son. And we found him way over by the lake, and if he slipped into that lake, it'd be tough to get out because it's pretty steep. "Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot for bringing him back. I appreciate that." "No problem. Keep him close. Have a good night." And we walked away. I couldn't even talk. I was so mad. When we get about a mile away, I just looked at Angie. I go, "Can you freaking believe that?" She goes, "No, I can't believe it." Maybe Angie and I were supposed to intercept that boy. before harm came to him? I don't know. Well, a lot of weird things have happened in my life, but that was one of the weirdest. So, that's 2 stories for you today. Sarah Reiser, that's a strange one. I appreciate you being here. Please share this on your social media. Do something friendly for people. Help them out when they need a healthy hand. It's a kindness revolution. It doesn't cost you anything to be kind. Huck and Paulides are out.